Welcome back to another episode of Spiritual Teachers Podcast. With me today is my dear friend and brother, Skyler Lands. Skyler is a primitive skills enthusiast. He lives full-time off-grid. Skyler was born on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana. He's 35% Native American and was raised in the North American indigenous ways. It's such an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining, Skyler.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure being on here. And yeah, I guess we can just talk a little bit of uh, where I was born and where Peter mentioned, and up to where I am now, and maybe uh, towards the end wrap up how instead of finding differences on like how the world is fixated now on just nitpicking on what everything is wrong with human beings and find what we all have in common and what how we can actually heal each other rather than, you know, fixating on thinking we got to do it all on our own because quite frankly that has never been possible. And I can maybe share on instances on my life where I've definitely learned that having people is a very necessary component for existence to manipulate a whole bunch of scenarios that we call life into the present and how we are how we kind of have to pick up the pieces of what the remnants are left and all what's good in us all and uh, learn from things that don't work like slavery, racism, genocide, and colonialism, and accepting even our colonist ancestors of what they did because they have 2,000 years of uh, genociding, Holocaust like wars that lasted through centuries just in the name of colonizing, in the name of the church, in the name of kingdoms, in the name of a certain king who just didn't like this group of people just because they lived closer to the earth and maybe he felt threatened by that type of existence because that goes against his uh, uh, violent regime of slavery or anything that would be not coinciding and harmonious with what we call life.
Absolutely,
So
man.
of course we had to put all the European indigenous peoples down. You know, like Europe once upon a time had 500 tribes, much like North America. So throughout my whole life, I've had to come to realization that I cannot hate one and love the other, and I can't love either. I just am. I just am a human being and have been harassed, not only on the reservations, but off the reservations by humans. I'm not even going to say who or what. I'm like, they're just like humans harassing me because my existence threatened their reality of how their life should be.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, I would love to hear like how your life progressed, right? So first you were born in Montana in the Black Hills Reservation, right? And what was that? Do you
uh,
remember? Do you remember what that was like?
uh, well, when I was born on East Glacier, uh, Browning, Montana, on the Blackfeet Reservation. I only lived there for a few years. I've only been there two or three times in my adult life.
Mhm.
But as far as living on that reservation when I was a baby, I don't remember too much. But we moved to the Rosebud Lakota Reservation in South Dakota, which is the eastern uh, neighbor to Pine Ridge Reservation, which we moved to after we lived a number of years on the Dene Reservation on Four Corners in Arizona. Uh, as far as living on those reservations, I do remember a little bit of Rosebud. I was still like, I don't know, a baby. So obviously I'm not going to remember too much, but I really, this really do remember living and existing in Arizona, and I really did enjoy living there. But also having to go to school, like or public school that is, for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. Uh, there was some tension just because I was from a different tribe or I was white appearing, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know what it was, but school was definitely rugged. But out of school, I really did enjoy the culture, the people, the food, the environment, the landscape, everything about it. I truly enjoyed, and in fact, I really do miss that part of the North America.
So li
As
living on the
before there
land,
was no borders, so keeping that in mind, you know, if you're Mexican, you're probably not. You're most likely indigenous, North
right,
American indigenous. So
right,
I do believe that we should deconstruct borders in our mind because I think borders do more separation than we might think. You know, like yeah, I'm Guatemalan, but yeah, but you're also a human being. You know, so you should be treated as such.
right. Yeah, for sure. And I
Are you still
think,
there, Peter?
yeah, yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where did it cut out?
Oh no, it kept going. You were saying if you're in Guatemala, you're still a human being. You're still, if you're in Mexico, you're
Yeah, yeah,
potentially
you should be. Yeah, like yeah, it doesn't matter which nation you're from. Like I think borders, you know, it's just like nations have borders just because of political agenda. I believe before we had regions, but we didn't have borders, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize it wasn't that long ago that California was actually part of Mexico.
Right. And I mean, Washington was part of the Oregon Northwest Territory, and
Right,
now it's called Washington and Oregon or Idaho, you know. It's
right,
like so
right,
ridiculous. And each of these little borders have their own little state laws. You know, that just goes across for the entire globe. You know, like different nations have different laws for different people. You know, I think humans should have human laws. So I think if we can get back to that, I think that human laws can be rekindled through animism because animism uh, constructs the reality that each thing, whether it has a heartbeat or not, has an energy or a divine attribute to it.
like a
You know,
spirit.
because like you can pick up a rock, yeah, or like even just like pick up a rock. You know, it's a rock, but depending on the kind of rock, you can shape it, you can melt it, you can crack it, and you can maneuver it and manipulate it in a way to suit your needs. You know, and it just so happens that Mama Earth really does care for us and wants us to succeed. So, and gave us brains to make necessary tools to make our lives a little bit easier. So we're not using our fingernails. Um, but also we've kind of abused this power and made things like uh, missiles and planes and bombs and all these crazy things that we decide to keep hurting each other with. And it's with outdated ideologies that there is a hierarchy of certain religion or a certain nation. You know, that's where borders come in again. So
Right.
I think if we think instead of like, yeah, of course, you know, I'm very much so viscerally um, proud, you know, of like where I come from because, you know, uh, my peoples were genocided time and time again, you know, so like I'm really proud that they had the strength and fortitude to come through that. And you know, I think if they were to see me now and see like a little bit of that little bit of the resemblance in me, and what they can remember of like my lifestyle and what I do, you know, I think I'm doing them a little bit of a favor because I think they right before they died, they wished that their descendants could have a better life than they did. And that's been true. There's been hard times, but also I'm not having to undergo boarding schools or worrying about a king um, taking over very aggressively my entire nation and my
Right.
community.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
not
man.
having to currently undergo that, but you never know what's going to go down. So
Right. Right.
I just kind of have that tucked in the back of my head.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And so growing up on the res, when did you start getting into primitive skills?
Well, let's see. Well, hmm, I would say about 13. I mean, well, ever since I was like a toddler, like I remember being on a horse when I was 5 years old. I had a bow and arrows with, like a knife, like a little, uh, what is it? A little strayed little pocket knife.
Hmm.
And I thought that was great. That's all I needed. I was like, I have a knife to cut little sprigs of juniper. I got a bow to shoot rabbits and snakes, or birds, whatever.
Hmm.
And I was really good with it. I was like, I could hit a target every time. Whatever
Wow.
wanted to shoot, I could shoot it.
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and I got my own horse when I was 9 years old, my very own horse,
Wow.
and loved the thing. Yep. Uh, Fortunately, my he's still around. He lives with my dad along with our other three horses. So four horses in total live at my dad's property in the Black Hills in South Dakota, which his property borders against Wind Cave National Park, and that's actually where I lived in a teepee for many years, from like 16 to 18 or 19.
Oh, wow.
And then at the time before that, I lived in a teepee on and off by choice. Um, we had a house, but we liked being in the teepee because it was just an awesome space to be in. And yeah, like starting fires have, like different uh, creative ways to start fires, whether it's like hand drill, it's like literally two sticks, takes two sticks to start a fire up. So it's just like a base plate, you cut like a little keyhole kind of on one side of the board or shaving that you're using off of cottonwood or some softer tree. And then you would, for like the dowel or like the drill that you use to make a fire, you would probably would want a harder wood
Hmm.
because you're applying a lot of pressure. But like harder meets softer, like there's a good friction there, and just work it, and takes a little patience, takes a little elbow grease, and takes many times of failing. But you can get it. But practicing that, you keep. So there's kind of like primitive skills there, and my dad
I
and
heard that that's
my
one of the
older
hardest
brother
ways to
were.
start fire.
I could see that. It definitely makes calluses like none other.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And hide tanning. So my dad was a hide tanner for as far as I could remember. I remember he always was having hides laying around from like roadkill or hunters, or maybe it was something that he got, or anyways, he always had hides around and like was actively working on them, tanning hides, making rawhide or brain tan. He's only ever done brain tan, which I've only had experience doing. There's other methods like bark tanning, vegetable tanning is another one. And so like plant matter tanning essentially is like, so there's, how we have tea, like the tannins in the tea, like it's basically what you're doing. You're making a tea with this. So for bark tanning, you would want to use like sumac. Like I said, I've never done bark tanning, but from the people I do know who have done it, this is what they said they've used was Douglas fir bark or sumac or red willow. Something that has like a really pungent dark red, or I think I think even yellow would work. I don't know. I never
Like
bark tanned,
strong
but
tannins
I'm
basically in it,
sure.
right?
Yeah, so basically, yeah, you just boil the shit out of it, like literally, and then make a decent tea, and then you soak your hides in there, like your scraped hides that have no flesh or fat, and the membranes all broken up in there, because like our skin fiber is just like, I mean, every skin fiber, but if you were to take a microscope to it, it's like a woven tapestry and like very tightly woven, and that skin. And like when you take a scraper, it's just basically loosening those fibers, like those woven fibers, for it to accept the tannins or the fats that you're applying to it. And then once it's soaked into the hide, you would want to rub it over a cable, so it's going to sink to the floor or around a post or yeah, or straight around could press on like firmly grip either side of the hide and like work it back and forth. That's another way of
Mhm.
doing it. Or have or a group effort. Another way of doing it is have yeah.
We lost you there for a second. Can you hear me?
The size of your hide, but at least 5 people to or the hide and like work.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I was the last thing we heard was that you could use several people to uh, stretch out the hide over a pole or over a table, something to break up those fibers. And so
Yep.
just,
And
just for listeners that don't know, a brain tan is you actually rub the brain of the animal on the skin, right? Like on the hide after a
yep.
little bit of processing, right? Like removal
Uh
of this fur.
and yep. And just a fair warning, for brain tanning, this is what I was told, but you might want to avoid using cow brains for the reason of mad cow disease and because it has a potential of getting under your fingernails. But I think if you just wear gloves, that's an easy way to get around it.
Right.
But if you want to do it like straight up, like all primitive, no gloves, you probably would want to use it. So say if you get a goat or a pig, uh, pig brain is actually really great because it's super fatty.
Hmm.
For this is that's actually what we used for the longest time. Uh, well, at least in my family, for tanning our hides because it's super fatty. You only need 4 pounds of it, I think, 3 to 4 pounds depending on the size of hide.
Okay. So like for obviously for an elk or a buffalo, you'd need more than the
Yeah,
deer.
probably for a buffalo, you might want. So yeah, so say for a deer, like 3 to 4 pounds, and for a buffalo or elk, especially a buffalo, since it is such a thick hide, you probably would want at least 8 to 12,
Pounds
and that's
of
even
pig
kind of
brain.
cutting it. Yeah, so like I would even go like 15 to 16 because it
Mhm.
is so big and
Yeah.
so thick. Yeah, it's
Have you ever done a buffalo hide?
I have I've done one or two.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah,
So
there's
just for people that don't that are new to this, uh, the hides can be used to make leather jackets, moccasins, which are like a type of shoes. They can be made to make
for
drones.
lodges.
Yeah.
For bed rolls, for saddles, for thicker leathers that you might would want for a saddle, like say the cinch or the reins for your horse, rope, uh, rawhide is a really awesome material. It's actually what I use uh, a lot of times to wrap my tools with. So say like my axe heads especially. So like right under the axe head, like I'll have like a wrapping underneath, like extending out or like wrapping around the handle like 6 to 8 inches underneath the
Oh, cool.
and
So it
I'll
keeps
use
it
a
hard, like hard and
yeah
easy
so
to
it's like
grip.
a cast around the handle essentially and like that so say if you miss or like or if you don't or if axe head gets embedded into whatever you're splitting, it's not gonna like hit the wood and potentially I mean it's gonna hit it but it's not like the integrity of the wood handles will last longer.
It's protecting it basically.
Yeah. It's a really hard, durable cast, and you would get the rawhide wet and use hide glue.
Cool.
or you can even use a pine pitch.
Okay. And
But
that's more of the
pine pitch is
traditional
really
way, right?
messy though.
Okay. And
Yeah.
how do you make pine pitch?
Well, it's boiled down pine sap.
Okay. And it turns
Yeah,
black,
it's just
right?
rendered. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And that's the traditional
Or
way.
sometimes a gray even. It's kind of weird,
Okay.
but depending on the pine. But yeah, it usually turns black.
And, and that's kind of the traditional way to that was used almost like a glue, right?
Yep, and totally non-toxic, so it's not tested on animals.
Right,
No,
right,
I'm just kidding. Uh, no, it's totally friendly. It's just, there's no like things that we can't read in there, like these are materials that we have access to. It just takes a little bit of effort to get it, but it's a few more steps than working however long to go to the store to buy it.
right, right. And it's
So
natural and
yeah,
it's not gonna seep into your skin like a super glue or anything like that, you know?
no, and if yeah, it does get in your skin, you just simply take some dirt and rub it onto the sticky area, and it'll bead up, and or like like it'll like the tar or the pitch will turn into little dirt beads, and then you just wash it in some water. So dirt and water gets it off.
That's so beautiful because using what nature gives us is so important because especially, you know,
Right, and especially when it's locally sourced, like if yeah, I'm just thinking like I just see like look at all these trees here.
yeah,
We have no shortage ridiculous of me to outsource, if I can help it to like yes stay local to where the region I'm at because it's it also provides an understanding in our body and like what kind of environment we are in because we are simply using the materials around us rather than being unfamiliar with the environment and using foreign sources and materials.
for sure. For sure.
Uh,
So then so just for the listeners, you have a lineage as well in like the Norse, like Viking kind of background, right?
uh, uh, yeah, so just real quick, it's actually a profound. So you'd be going Viking, or you'd be like you would be pronounced Viking if it were to call the Americans Marines. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like there's a whole country is made of Marines. Like no, like there's the nation of United States of America. We're Americans, so to say. Uh,
Okay. Okay, you broke up a little bit there, but
so yeah, yeah,
basically you were saying that Vikings was like something that was given to people that were more the warriors, right?
yeah. So it was like more of a warrior class. So, but like the warriors that so Viking basically means to venture somewhere by sea and
Okay.
do raids and trades and what have you.
Right.
So it's more of like a profession, or like a different type because like there's the Marines, right? Like there's the grunt soldiers, and then like there's the home side soldiers, like they're still Marines, but they're not like out there on active duty.
Hmm. Right.
So I guess the uh, real word for the Vikings, if you're not referring to the militaristic profession, would be the Norse
Hmm.
peoples, and the Norse peoples are actually descended from the Germanics, or like the different Germanic tribes that existed during or prior and during the Roman occupation of Europe,
Hmm.
and have slowly been decimated through the church, through the empire, and through neighboring kingdoms who were adopting more civilized ways of life and turning away from animism. Uh,
Right.
so if we want to talk about just shortly about the pantheons in Europe, and say in India too, like I don't I wouldn't know like the equivalent to say Thor and Hercules, but they're essentially the same thing, but they're just called thing. We go to Africa, I don't know what they're under. I'm sure it has very similar qualities to that of Thor, to that of Hercules, or the Thunder Beings to the Lakota people.
Hmm.
So essentially, what I'm trying to say is, I think in a way, we all sort of kind of believed in the same thing. We just called it different things.
Right.
Like there's different attributes of the different gods or deities, whatever you want to say. I
Hmm.
prefer deities. Uh, like I don't really know too much about the Greek pantheon, but I just know that they're very similar. They're both the ominous thunder and lightning, and they're attributed to that, and like in their functions in society, like they have similar uh like maybe rituals or ceremonies, especially in the old days before the church is, like if we can go back far enough and understand that we are all one people, so because we kind of believe in the same thing, like, well, and I can say like the Mongols, for instance, they believed in the deity of thunder as well. So like there's also similarity in names too, Thor, Tengri, Hercules, they sound a little bit similar. And
Yeah.
to the Saxons, they called Thor Dundras, where
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so much similarity in these different parts of the world that had these different beings, that they
right.
and
And
deities.
yeah, and like I like to look, like I virtually know nothing about South American, Australian, African, and Asian tribes. I am just I decided to take the path on what my blood is, and that's those two things. So
Hmm.
that's what I'm most familiar with. But
Hmm.
just out of fascination, like I'll just go and read about uh Australian Aboriginal um like pantheons and sort of what they believed in, or like at least what's like can be said. And I'm like, wow, it's like actually very similar to what the maybe some plains tribes would have believed in, or
Yeah,
like
it's
sort of practiced, like, and like they have like this whole cave and somewhere in Australia that like depicts like the god of thunder, because living in Australia, it's like boiling hot, and any amount of thunder would have been sacred.
right.
So yeah, it would have been this whole thing once you finally get some rain after a dry season. I can imagine so like in Africa, like I'm
Hmm.
not saying Africa has always been hot, there once upon a time it was a cold place to live actually during like Neolithic times, uh but
Yeah.
yeah, like you can see where like the thunder or like bravery or like elements of heat, like like the Norse deity of summertime would have been his name would have been Baldur, and like there's a whole mythological story behind Baldur, and of course Odin is said to be attested to be an actual walking, talking human being, but his name literally transcends all physical realms. It's like kind of goes more into spirit rather than, especially like the male spirit. Like like Frey too, he like represents male virility and
Hmm.
male vigor, and like springtime, or like the male functions of of reproduction, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm sure like someone who I hope eventually listens in Africa or like these different places in the world. And I'm like, yeah, we call Thor and Balder and Odin and all these different things. Yeah, we call them these things. You know, we believe in the same thing. So what that is, the proper term would not be paganism. I think that's pagan is a Latin derivative word that was given to the tribes of Europe and elsewhere, a kind of a low name, you know.
Hmm.
Uh or heathen was another one. It's like the ones that live in it was kind of like more of a like a tease, you know, like those people that live in the heather, you know, like the heather being the wood
Mm.
or the
Hmm.
woods.
Hmm.
So and the tribes they wouldn't have called themselves animists. They would have called themselves the human beings, you know, because we go everywhere across the world. You go to the Native Reservation, you go to the Lakota Reservation, or not even reservations, but to those nations. And I can almost guarantee you that most of them call themselves the human beings.
Right. Right.
So and that in itself is a whole similarity of how.
Well, the beauty of it also is like if you take somebody from Australia and uh, you talk to them and they share about their perspectives with spirit and their what happens after we die, and then you talk to somebody in South America like especially if you talk to the shamans, it's a lot of times you're going to find so much similarities in their beliefs and their stories because it doesn't matter where you go in the world, you're going to have that happening. Can you hear me, Skyler?
Yeah.
So I was just saying that if you talk to a shaman in Australia and you talk to a shaman in South America or in Siberia, anywhere in the world, uh, they go into the spirit realm, they're gonna have very similar experiences and stories about, what happens when we die and the deities that they interact with
Hmm.
and the
Right.
spirits that they commune with, it's like it
And one cool thing, I'll go ahead.
yeah, that was it.
Okay. Yeah. And another common ground that we all share is the understanding. I don't want to say beliefs because you know this exceeds beliefs. It's a virtual all around general understanding. I think what we all of our ancient ancestors had was past lives and future lives and even the present because we've all had death rituals that you know treated our deceased with respect and honor and gave them supplies that they would need. And I can say that for the Norse peoples, and you know there's some similarities in the Lakota culture as well. And I think like back in the day, before it was like before the time of boarding schools and reservations and all that, I think when a warrior or someone was deceased, they would do a scaffold and like a burn on the scaffold. But they would give them like the important things that they had in this lifetime, like their bow, say an axe or a kettle,
Hmm.
things that were necessary components, and a horse, you know, because you know you got to live with a horse.
Hmm.
And the Norse would do that. They would any anyone who was willing to sacrifice themselves to like I can't live anymore in this lifetime, like I want to go with my dead husband, then she would give her life, you know, someone to do it for her and like lay her next to her husband and like say a few slaves would do that willingly. There's a trope that slaves were treated horribly amongst Lakota and Norse and different tribal cultures, and actually slaves were actually treated uh, more fairly than warrior men were in times of war. So
Oh wow.
th yeah, so like if there was like a basic understanding to let the women and children and the slaves, you know, be freed and not be killed, they would be taken anyways, but they wouldn't be brutalized or killed like the men were.
Hmm. And
Because women, children, and slaves were useful. You don't want to brutalize them, if you want anything good to come out of them. You know what I mean? Because for your society for your societal functions to move on.
for sure.
So, yep.
One thing I recently learned from one of my teachers that uh, there was, during the what's the name of that march? The it's something like March of the Tears.
Oh,
Uh,
Trail of Tears.
Yeah, the Trail of Tears. So for the Trail of Tears, there was actually many African American slaves that were also part of that, and they came and lived on the reservation in Oklahoma with a lot of the
Hmm.
people, with the native people, right? Like I don't remember ever learning about that in
No,
school or anything.
I know. I just kind of recently came across that too. I was like, really not too long ago. I was like, wow, that's like we actually and like the first cowboys were not white settlers. They were actually former African or like black slaves and indigenous peoples,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is really interesting. And I'm like, wow, like media likes to push that. It's like, oh, it's the white guy, it's the settler, the rancher dude that has all the
Right.
cows and doing the cowboy shit, but it's actually like natives and blacks doing that, which is like I like that story way better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes way more sense, I think.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because uh my teacher, he's African American and he has lineage to those slaves that came into Oklahoma, and now he pours Native American Lakota sweat lodge,
Oh
and
wow.
and he's been a sun dancer for 30 years, and it's really interesting to learn from him.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so,
Wow.
for those that don't know, can you speak a little bit on what Sweat Lodge is?
Okay. Yeah, Sweat Lodge is essentially, well, I can speak shortly on the structure of it. So it's a dome shaped sh shelter, so to say, with then the bracers or like the ribs in there are made with saplings. So that would have been most likely white willow and or red willow because willow actually has the well, aspirin derives from the components that are found in willow. So when you take painkiller, that's like that has a little bit of willow uh, compounds in there to help relieve pain, and that's really awesome to think about. And traditionally, the shelters would have been constructed with that. I mean, they still are. I think the most traditional sweats still are. But they would have been covered with buffalo hides or elk or
Hmm.
bigger game because it's kind of a structure that needs to fit you know usually 10 to 12 people in of what I think the most amount of people that I was in the sweat with was probably 15 people and that was very tight.
I've been in one
uh
with 60. Yeah,
how
that
big was the sweat?
it was big. It was big. But we were
Did it
we
get
were
hot
cheek
enough
to
in there?
cheek. Yeah, we were cheek to cheek, and we brought in, I think we brought in all the stones. So we brought in like six, every person had a stone. So we had like 60 stones in there too. So it was
That's actually
very,
pretty cool.
yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah.
really cool.
How big was the sweat?
It was big. It was big. Yeah.
Did it get hot enough in there?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, with 60 stones in there, it was really hot.
Yeah, how big are the stones? Like head size?
Um, Probably like that. I mean, they're
Okay.
they're all different sizes, but
Football
Yeah.
size. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like football size, a little bit smaller, some of them a little bigger.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah. So when the steam or like hot air or steam, I guess, would hit the willow, it actually the willow would excrete, especially when it's a fresh sapling, the compounds to help relieve pain, which is really awesome to think
Oh.
about.
Oh,
Um,
that's so cool.
right. As far as like the spiritual side in it, I think you just have to go to one, and I hope that's granted to you, whoever's listening. It is a one of a kind of experience, and I think just going into it open-minded and um, just expecting to be um, I guess at times it can get really uncomfortable because if you're mindful, I could say praying, but if you don't pray, that's cool too. But just be centered into what you're in yourself and be open-minded
Yeah.
is just what I have to say.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful experience for sure. I mean,
Yeah. And yeah, so we use rocks that are usually about football to head size or maybe even fist size, but depending on whoever's running it or however many I know for Lakota Sweat, they use seven main stones that you start off with and you pray with each stone, and that's just to honor each direction.
mhm.
So
Like
you got four
north,
directions
south, east,
and then
west.
yep, yep, and then you got the direction below you, above you, and then the seventh stone is what's here now. So that's the
Mhm,
direction.
mhm.
So there's seven. So that's a little bit of a significance in there. Um, and then the whoever is hosting it is leading it. So a song with prayer and it also is pouring hot water and sometimes really uh, medicinal herbs like sage, cedar, juniper. Sometimes I've someone used palo. No, not Palo Santo. Uh, what's the sap that it's not frankincense, it's copal.
Gopal.
I've
Uh-huh.
been yeah, I've been in one where someone used copal, which was really nice. So
Hmm.
yeah, if you just go in it, and if you are accepted or have been bestowed the opportunity to go to the sweat lodge, yeah, I would just say be mindful and be respectful. It's a very old practice, and it's still a miracle that it's being practiced today, under the regime of colonization and genocide.
Hmm.
So please be respectful.
Because
Um,
for most people, they don't know it was banned to practice
yeah, it was
until
banned. It was in fact illegal
right.
for like I don't think that the American natives were considered citizens until the after the Vietnam War, as
Oh
far
wow.
as I'm aware. And boarding schools didn't like the last boarding school existed until 1997, and that's just like what I know. There might have
Wow.
been one still running somewhere remote, but so it's very has very much so affected the many lives of the people who are in fact North American indigenous. And like I said, I don't know. I virtually know nothing about other indigenous practices that are from Africa or South America or what have you, but respect to them. And I think we all have similar practices and similar things that we believe in, but we just call them different things. So I think just being respectful of each other and our ancient practices, that I think we should be more than it's a great honor to be carrying these still and I think it's similar to like to say the Russian banya, like maybe it was like a long time ago was like maybe a community ritual or something like that. I'm sure they had like their own ties with like even shamanism, like in Siberia and Banya. I don't know. Like yeah, I like
Yeah.
to think that they did, because
Yeah.
having been to Banya with you, Peter, I would think it's similar to sweat lodge. You like you steam and you get hot water and cold water. It's a different method, but I think like the like community speaking in the region and like if you go back long enough and like the Finnish or like the Scandinavian sauna, I think they had certain rituals that had just have been lost over time and throughout the centuries. But I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, for sure. I
like
think
well and like I actually I don't know really much saunas. Like I have a friend here who went to one, but it's similar, but instead of with hide or canvas, and they use dome rather than hide, but or
uh, we we
sticks
we
or
lost you there for a
like pine
second,
boughs.
Skyler. We lost you there for a
Oh, okay,
second. You
let's
were
see.
saying about the Temescal?
Yeah, yeah. Is that what it's called? Like the clay sweat lodge?
Yeah.
I've heard about it from a friend that lives here. But yeah, so I was like, wow, that's actually how he was explaining it. Uh, it sounded really similar to sweat lodge, like as we know it from like the Plains tribes. And
Mhm.
I know like the tribes up here had sweat lodge too, and they just their policies and precautions of the ritual or ceremony or what have you. They I'm sure they had a little bit different methods or practices, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't all that different.
Mhm. Yeah, so in
Um,
Mexico, the Temescal is uh basically with clay instead of the hides that you were mentioning
yeah,
traditionally. And nowadays, people use cotton blankets and
yeah, yeah,
thicker
thicker
things like
material
that.
like wool felt or yeah, thick wool blankets and canvas
Hmm.
tarps usually.
Hmm.
And that works. I've also been in ones that have like really went above and beyond, and I think that was really cool too. They covered it with a bunch of like tree or like pine boughs or cottonwood boughs, and they just like really wove like the branches in there with the leaves and the needles, and really
Oh,
made it
wow.
as mostly airtight as they could, and it worked. Like it was actually really interesting, and it was all reusable material. Like you could use them for baskets again or whatever. You just like have your one-time sweat, and then use those things to for something else. Or
Wow. That's really cool.
I don't think it's like a multi-use thing. So you could probably get like two times out of it. I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe it'll last longer, but
Did they have
uh,
anything draped over that?
probably. I'd imagine like some sort of hide to like keep it. But yeah, there's I'm sh like I'm sure they would have. Like I don't know, but like it is possible though to do it without a hide. It's just like all boughs,
Right,
and
right.
you could probably use like a clay too. I mean, or
Mhm.
whatever.
Cool. Yeah, man.
Uh,
I think
Real
that
quick though, I
yeah.
don't want to butcher what the Crow Chief Plenty Coup said back in the day, but during the times of um, like assimilation onto the reservation for the Crow people, they had their famous Crow Chief. Chief Plenty Coups was his name, and I would read his book. There's his biography. I forget who was written by, but there's a book just simply called his name, Chief Plenty Coups. I would read his book. But what he said to about Sweat Lodge is, yeah, we've lost most of our things, like we've lost our capability to go far and wide on horses, live in teepees and follow buffalo or, um, that whole lifestyle is like how, as we known them to have, like, but they said just to stay close to Sweat Lodge. So I think if he said that, then I think it must be pretty important.
Right, right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would look into him. I also wouldn't hyper fantasize on just Lakota teachings because throughout the world there are many different beautiful teachings, and I would definitely suggest for everybody to look into their own heritage definitely be curious and interested in other, that's what I was trying to talk about. Like heal each other as human beings, but I think as human beings, it's almost our duty to repair on what has been taken from our ancestors through colonization, the church, and through greedy world owners like Soros and shit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, just return to the roots. Uh, Practice what you can, like what you're comfortable with. Say like, yeah, I can't tie hides, but I can really shoot a bow,
Hmm. Hmm.
or like, yeah, I can make baskets, I can make a fire. I don't really want to tan hides, if you have that capability, or like I want to literally live a teepee, but I can't right now. But I have a property that I can like practice certain things on. It's like kind of play around with the materials around you and like surprise yourself. There's also many wonderful people on YouTube who actually are really awesome and showing these skills.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and maybe just know some people around your neighborhood who just kind of does that stuff. But yeah, I would just go back to who you are
Yeah.
and who you are as a human being, and so am I, so is Peter, and so is everyone listening. I
Hmm.
hope there's no AI robots walking around, but uh, yeah, uh, just take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And I think my time here is coming to a close, and I can answer some questions if Peter's got any. But
Yeah, so I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. And I mean, we were planning to do another episode with you and your partner Cherie.
yep,
And
and I'll be more than happy to do a part two next weekend
okay,
as
okay,
well. Or
sounds good.
no, or
We'll figure out a time for it.
yeah, we'll figure out a time because I'm actually picking up my brother from the bus stop
Okay.
next
Yeah, we'll
weekend.
figure out a
So
time because we just started skimming the surface with this.
yeah,
So
and
much to talk about.
yep, and
Thank you
yeah,
so much, Skyler, for joining us today. Uh, it was
and let
really an
this
honor to have you.
uh view inspire you if you live somewhere deep in the city and maybe don't see a way out. Just know that there is a different way of life, and if it takes a lot more or a little bit of more struggling to get in a place to find you're happy, I would do it.
Absolutely.
So it takes a little bit of
Absolutely.
effort and maybe even a lot of effort and maybe even some sacrifice. But if you want to live a more peaceful life, and even if primitive skills don't make you happy, I would just keep your mind open and try to experience something like that once, and maybe it will rekindle something in you. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not for everybody.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a deep
but yes,
part of us.
just take care of yourself, take care of your fellow humans, and take care of the animals around you, because they've given us much pleasure and life throughout the centuries and millennia, and we've lived alongside them since the dawn of man. So,
Thank you,
and women,
Skyler. Thank you,
yeah.
Skyler. Uh,
Without women, men would be nothing. So,
yeah, it's true.
thank you, women.
Thank you, women. We love you,
Yeah.
women. Until next time, brother. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Peter. Till next time, you guys take care, and I'll catch up with you another time, Peter.
Okay. Take care. Thank you.
Yeah,
Until next
yeah.
time.